Welcome to the Championship Week edition of the Steel Scorpion Sports Podcast. Live from San Diego, I'm Jeff Miller.
Live from San Jose, I'm Kessler.
Mark, we're recording on Tuesday this week, mainly because both of us were in Vegas for Championship Weekend. So that would tell me, A, we have problems. B, it was one of the stranger weekends to be in Vegas because there are only two football games, and I don't bet NBA basketball or baseball, even though there isn't any baseball, or hockey. So it really limits your options. And C, for those that don't know, there was a fantasy trade convention out there for fantasy trade, for fantasy football, fantasy baseball. There was a draft. And Mark, you can give us an update on that if you like, having attended. But because both of us were in Las Vegas, we had to record a day late. So we apologize to any listeners out there that were looking for this yesterday. But thankfully, we can now talk about deflate gate if we choose to. But we'll leave that for later. Seeing as how we were both in Vegas, why don't you start us off, as always, with a gambling update?
All right, so the first game, the Seahawks closed as consensus 8.5-point favorites. That number rose throughout the week. They opened as 7-point favorites. When it came in on Seattle, they closed 8.5, and they did not cover. They won by 6. So if you had Green Bay, you did cover. The over-under for that game opened at 47. Got continually bet down with all the money that came on the under. It closed at 44. If you had the under, you were feeling good for pretty much the entire game. I know you and I talked a little bit late in the fourth quarter when it was 19-7, and we commented on the fact that there were just 26 points in the game, and this game would pretty easily go under. And then some strange things started happening. The game went to overtime, and at 28-22, it went over the number. In fact, it went to overtime right at the closing number of 44. Therefore, it was guaranteed to go over. In the second game, the Patriots opened as 7-point favorites. They closed as 7-point favorites, and they won by 38. So they just snuck over the number and covered just barely. And the over-under for that game opened at 53.5. Got bet down, closed at 52, and the final score of 45-7. Do some quick math here. Carry the 1. Was at 52. So it pushed the final number, but like I said, it opened at 53.5. It got that down. So if you went over at any point during the week, you were probably over that number, and you did not win. So yeah, pushed the final number, and that's how those Sunday games shook out.
Yeah, it's interesting. You and I were talking during as you mentioned, the late stages of that Seattle Green Bay game, and I think I even made a comment at one point, probably right after Green Bay intercepted, and I was like, oh, that's too bad. I was, just for the over people, I wanted it to have the potential to get to overtime, so, it would be an exciting finish, and they'd still be in the game. Little did I know that shortly thereafter it would go to overtime, and it would go to overtime on the number, as you said. So guaranteeing the over is a win, when for 2.5 hours of that, maybe 3 hours, you pretty much knew you were going to lose your over bet. And also, if you had bet on Seattle, just the money line, you knew you were losing that bet. There's nothing you could do about it. On the other game, though, I wanted to quickly mention, if you bet the alternate line of Patriots minus 35, you still covered?
Don't think that anyone is doing that. The main alternate line, they usually justify 3.5 points or so. The main alternate lines that I saw were Colts plus 3.5 or Patriots minus 10.5. And of course, you get a little bit better number if you bet that alternate line. And even if you did bet the alternate line, you still easily won. In fact, I saw a tweet or an article somewhere saying that one of the MGM properties received a 4 or 5 figure bet on Sunday morning from someone who bet the alternate line, and they had like Seahawks minus 11, and I think it paid plus 160. That person lost a fair amount of money because that did not happen. They did win by 6, but they did not cover that alternate line, nor even the real line. To look at on what you were just saying, when we were talking, it was 19-7. We kind of jokingly mentioned the prospect overtime, but then we pretty much blew it off because But the 12-point margin, that's not really a margin where you're going to see overtime. If it was a 10-point margin, a 14-point margin, maybe even a 13-point margin, you might think that it's possible. But at 13, not so much, or at 12 rather, not so much. And then, since we were in Vegas this weekend and we were looking at some of the list of all the different things you could bet on, and one of the ones that we had talked about was picking the two games against each other. You could have bet that the Colts-Patriots game would be higher scoring than the Packers and Seahawks game, and the line between it was 7.5. So it was Colts-Patriots minus 7.5 versus the early game. And when we talked when it was 19-7, we said, man, that Colts-Patriots minus 7.5 is pretty much an easy winner right now. There's only 26 points in this game. Well, with all the flurry of scoring at the end and the overtime, that game finished with 50 points, and the other game was 52. So what looked like an easy winner actually would have turned into a loser.
Yeah, so the Green Bay-Seattle game definitely turned a lot of bets upside down in a matter of 3 minutes, give or take, on the clock. I mean, really, I know the first touchdown scored by Seattle was 2:08 or 2:09, but I mean, the serious change in momentum started around the 3-minute mark when Seattle finally started moving the ball. But with that, why don't we just jump right in, Mark? Only have 2 games to discuss this week, obviously, on Championship Week, and the early game was Seattle hosting Green Bay. As you mentioned, Seattle opens as a nice favorite, gets bet up. Everybody pretty much looked at this and said, Seattle's defense starting to round into shape, playing great the last 6 or 7 weeks of the season and then into the playoffs. Oh, and we saw this game between Seattle and Green Bay before in Week 1, and it didn't end well for Green Bay. And now you have a hobbled Aaron Rodgers. The odds of that ending better for Green Bay didn't seem likely. So I can understand why the line was where it was. And we all, I assume, were pretty shocked as the first half unfolds. And Green Bay, somehow, through the miracle of coaching or player development or something, suddenly learns how to play defense, turns Russell Wilson over for the game, 4 interceptions. There's a fumble lost as well. Green Bay goes into the half up 16-0. And I believe at the half mark, and correct me if I'm wrong, Seattle may have only had 1 or 2 first downs. Russell Wilson was something like 3 of 15 at the half. It was a miserable performance by Seattle. And that continued deep into the third quarter. And that's why, late in the game, when Green Bay settles for another field goal, gets it to 19-7, and that 7 came off of a fake field goal by Seattle. A gimmick play is their only way to score. Then they intercepted Wilson for the 4th time. At that point, the game's over, except for it's not, because it turns out you do have to play all 60 minutes, and some of the Green Bay players forgot that, like, say, the intercepting player with 5 minutes left, who just throws himself down to the turf and starts celebrating like he won the game, when he clearly had 10, 15, maybe more yards ahead of him. And you have to figure the Seattle players are either going to tackle him hard because they're angry, or at that point they may have just given up, and he may be able to break a couple tackles and keep going, get him into field goal range, and this game's over. So, Green Bay made a litany of errors, and I think you and I will go over a number of them in a moment here, that caused them to go from a sure thing, 16-0 at the half, 19-7 with 5 minutes to go in the game and the ball, to losing in overtime. Anything you want to add about the ebb and flow of the game before we get into the litany of Green Bay errors that they will live with all offseason?
I do want to defend Morgan Burnett a little bit. He's the guy that got the interception that you're just talking about. He did go down on the ground, but I actually saw a screenshot of that play today, and there's a clear picture of Julius Peppers standing about 5 yards in front of him, like with his hands down toward the ground, like he's basically telling him to go down. But the scariest part of the screenshot is you look and you see where the players are, and he had a little bit of a wall, and there was some offensive linemen that he could have basically run around. Like, he could have got, it seemed like at least 20 yards, if not more. And he went down at around the 40, his own 40, 45-yard line, something like that. He could have got it down basically to almost field goal range. But, he was also probably feeling that the game was pretty much won at that point. I know when I saw the interception, I thought the game was pretty much over. He's thinking in his head, I don't want to be one of those bozos that gets the interception and then fumbles it back, which we actually saw a number of years ago in a Patriots-Chargers game where Tom Brady threw an interception and then the Chargers player fumbled it back, and the Patriots ended up winning that game. So I'm sure that's a cautionary tale that maybe was in the back of his head. Plus, you have Julius Peppers standing in front of him telling him to go down. So it was a mistake, but I can, kind of sort of see how it happened. But yeah, Green Bay had just so many errors. Like, it's one of those games where, I don't know, do we give credit to Seattle for such a great comeback, or do we, just shine a spotlight on Green Bay and say, you guys choked and blew this game? And between those two choices, I'm kind of leaning towards Green Bay choked away this game.
Obviously, you're up 16-0 at half. Your defense is dominating the Seattle offense. The gimmick fake field goal does get Seattle into the game, but it's still 19-7. So you're right. At 5 minutes left, you've got the ball up 19-7. I have to say, Green Bay choked it away. Now, I will say the Drayton Florence play you were referring to from San Diego and New England, I believe that he'd gone down, and this is the one instance where I would accept this. New England had the ball late. They're driving. They're down. They need a score here, and I believe it was in the last, I don't think it was under 2 minutes yet, but it was nearing the 2-minute warning, where if he goes down, San Diego may be able to run out the clock. So there's a slight difference there. With 5 minutes left, you can't just kneel on it 3 times and run out the clock. We all know that. But, yeah, it was strange. And I did see the same shot you did with Julius Peppers. Still, you're the guy that catches it. Try and score. Play the game of football for a change. And this is the whole Green Bay mentality. That play epitomizes it. I felt like they got into the fourth quarter with that lead, and they suddenly went into this, and you and I, being Colts fans and having lived through the Tony Dungy, Jim Caldwell eras, know going ultra-conservative and going into the don't-lose mode never works out well. It's not how you overcome better teams or good teams. It's not how you advance in the playoffs. The playing not to lose tends to get you beat. And I felt like Green Bay, from the start of the fourth quarter on, basically was playing not to lose. And unfortunately for them, going down on an interception like that instead of running it back towards field goal range and giving up points, having a third-string tight end let an onside kick go right through his hands when in reality he should have been blocking and letting Jordy Nelson catch it. Aaron Rodgers handing the ball off to Eddie Lacy when Seattle had 9 or 10 guys at the line. Richard Sherman was one-armed and they didn't throw the ball at him at all. It was just one thing after another. And then when Green Bay finally did decide to pass, they, instead of running to keep the clock moving and forcing Seattle to take their last time out when you're up 19-7, you throw an incompletion to stop the clock for them. Oh, it was just one thing after another. And this, you and I actually mentioned this specific item. It didn't end up coming into play, but Green Bay, they get the ball back after Seattle takes the lead and converts that 2-point conversion on a Hail Mary-esque type play that Clinton Dix should have really knocked down at some point, but he clearly was just mesmerized by how high the ball was as it was floating over towards the tight end in front of him. But even after all that, Green Bay gets the ball back, they drive down, they get in field goal range, and then Mike McCarthy calls a timeout with 14 seconds left on fourth down. And because of that,
19 seconds left.
19 seconds left, right. And because of that, it forced them to kick off at 14 seconds because he had called timeout. It didn't end up hurting them, but it forced them to kick off, where kickoffs, that strange things can happen. It let them give the ball back to Russell Wilson. Who knows if Pete Carroll had been gutsy and said, hey, let's just throw a deep one, and there's a penalty or something. You don't leave any time on the clock. You wait till like 4 seconds left to call your timeout. It just epitomized to me how poorly managed the end of the game was for Green Bay.
It made no sense. We were actually talking at the time, and when they took the timeout, we were both like, what's he doing? We were trying to think of any possible, logical reason why it could happen. If it was on third down, we could maybe understand if you have a bad snap or something, you want to say a timeout. But it's on fourth down. If you have a bad snap, the game's over. You don't get a fifth down chance. So to take that timeout there makes no sense whatsoever when you're going to have to kick off. And like you said, give Seattle a chance to get their hands back on the ball. And we haven't even mentioned yet two of the more questionable decisions, which started off the game in the first quarter when the Packers settled for two very short field goals. They had an 18-yard field goal and a 19-yard field goal. The 18-yard field goal was from like the half-yard line, and the 19-yard field goal was like from the 1.5-yard line. If you can punch either one of those in, say you convert one and not the other, you're still getting in the six. Even if you convert neither of them, you're leaving Seattle with the ball on the 1-yard line. Something good may happen from there. You could get a fumble, an interception, or they fumble snap, get a touchdown or safety out of it, or stuff them and still get the ball back on their 40-yard line. There's just so many reasons to go for it there, and yet McCarthy settles for two very short field goals there. The other thing you mentioned on the two-point conversion defense with Hawk and Nix, I'm not sure what he was thinking. I mean, he is standing right next to Luke Wilson, basically at the goal line or the 1-yard line, and he sees the ball. You can see in the replay, like in slow motion, he's kind of just like standing there beside Wilson. He doesn't seem to react to the ball. He doesn't seem to really do much of anything. He kind of he waits for Wilson to catch the ball and then make a half-hearted attempt to tackle him as Wilson pretty much just turns and falls into the end zone. I don't understand that at all. At the very least, if you feel like you can't jump up and knock it down, you can tackle him. You can literally just tackle him. And yeah, they'll get another chance from like the 1-yard line because, a conversion attempt is from the 2.5. So they tackle him. It's going to be half the distance of the goal. They're still going to have to, convert from the 1.25-yard line. At that point, they're close enough. They'd probably try to pound it down with Williams, but you still, you might be able to stop them. But to stand there and just watch them catch it and walk into the end zone, I did not understand that whatsoever.
No, it was very poorly done. And the sad thing is he had a great game up until then. He had a couple interceptions. He had really played effective. He was one of the reasons that Wilson had such a pathetic game. And let's not kid ourselves. Russell Wilson, while everybody's giving him props for coming back, throwing that great pass in overtime, the only reason they weren't winning the game prior to that was Russell Wilson. His game was so pathetic that the turnovers, one of them, sure, Curse probably should have caught, and bouncing off your hands to the other team is maybe not the quarterback's fault. But a couple of them were just bad throws, and they were picks. And because of that, they were losing, and now he's getting all the praise on the flip side, which I think is a little overstated because in all honesty, he didn't have a good game. In fact, he had a bad game. He made one good throw in overtime. Hey, good job being, ready to turn it around. Once you got to overtime, you had all the good feel-good momentum. Hey, we're back in this game. We still have a chance to win. We win the coin toss. Let's go score. But let's not let that erase the fact that for 4 quarters, he was pretty bad.
Yeah, he was. And I'm sure he will, be his normal Russell Wilson self for the Super Bowl. This was kind of an anomaly. But, yeah, he did have a very bad game, but he was able to stay poised and get a couple, touchdown drives there in the fourth quarter, and then was pretty much unstoppable in overtime with a good long pass to Baldwin that set up the really just, pretty strike to Curse. But, yeah, overall for the first 50 minutes of the game, not good.
And I don't do this often, but I do want to defend Mike McCarthy for at least one moment. And for one, the first field goal he kicked. I know you're at the half-yard line, it's 4th down, but I do say you take points early in the game. The first time you got down there, it's 4th down. It's still 0-0 at that point. Kick the field goal, okay, because getting points on the board, especially on the road against Seattle, and their offense wasn't looking good, and it hasn't been dominant in the last few weeks. I think getting an early lead was key to his team's psyche, so I'm okay with the first time you get down there kicking a field goal. But then the second time you get down there, you already have points on the board. You have the lead. In fact, at that point, your defense is playing better than you probably anticipated, and Russell Wilson isn't playing well. Why not go for it and leave him the ball at the 1-yard line and have a 99-yard drive and say, hey, go for it. You've got 99 yards to get the go-ahead score. It's just too conservative for me. The first one I could accept, especially in a game where you thought it was going to be low scoring and the conditions were sloppy. Getting any points early and getting a lead, especially for Green Bay on the road against a team that had destroyed them, I think was okay. But that second time you get down there, come on. You can't just keep settling for field goals.
So when you say you're willing to accept the first field goal, are you saying that you are anti-math?
I am not anti-math. I am pro-momentum.
Okay, because the expected value of going for it on fourth down from the half-yard line is, I believe, somewhere around 3.7 points. The expected value of kicking a field goal is probably 2.99 because you're almost never going to miss it. So the math says, you should always go for what's the highest expected value, right?
Well, you also are probably taking league averages when you're saying those average, 3.75. Green Bay against Seattle's defense may not be 3.75s from the half-yard line. So, and you have to know that as a team, do you have a play that you believe you can get a half yard on? Maybe they didn't trust Eddie Lacy to do it. Okay. A healthy Aaron Rodgers, you definitely roll him out and it's going to happen. But maybe, it was still early in the game. Maybe his calf wasn't loosened up enough. So I can validate that even if the expected outcome says to go for it, kicking the field goal wasn't such a horrible idea until you continued to kick field goals.
The other thing I'll say on this game for my gambling related, for Pie Gal to have, and for other gambling games as well, to have the bonus bets where you can, put a bonus bet like you're going to get a flush in this hand. And of course, the payouts are way, way less than they are in reality. Like you might get, for example, 5-1 for a flush, even though you're only getting a flush like one out of every 20 hands or 30 hands, something like that. At one point during the game, and this is based off of Pro Football Reference, looking at the exact situations from all the games over time and calculating the odds of a team winning. And when Green Bay was hit 19-7, they got that fourth interception of Seattle. At that point, Green Bay, I think, was a 99.3% chance of winning. Even later than that, after they punted the ball and Seattle had the ball and then they had an incompletion and with like 2.5 minutes to go or something like that, Green Bay had a 99.9% chance of winning. Seattle was at 0.1. Okay? And yet, if you were doing live in-game betting, the odds that you were given for Seattle were 20-1. So think about that. They had a 0.1 chance of winning according to the math of historical games, and yet the best you could get was 20-1 on that bet.
That seems a little out of whack, but that's just me.
Just a tad.
Yes, very strange, but true, sadly. So, as we know from our discussion here, Green Bay did end up choking away the game. Seattle won the coin toss and decided to go all the way for the touchdown. And apparently Russell Wilson called that touchdown with his offensive coordinator. He told him he was going to check to a pass to Curse, and they were going to score on that drive. And after he hits Baldwin, he gets up to the line. There's a single high safety. He checks to a pass in single coverage, and sure enough, Curse scores a touchdown, and the legend of Russell Wilson grows. So now the question coming out of Seattle is, do they have to pay Russell Wilson, Andrew Luck money? We'll save that conversation for another day because it doesn't impact the Super Bowl. But post-Super Bowl, that will be an interesting conversation because both Russell Wilson and Andrew Luck appear to have some contracts in the works for this offseason. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of those contracts.
Yeah, let's save that conversation for after the Super Bowl because it'll be especially interesting if the Seahawks do win, and then here you have a quarterback that already has 2 Super Bowl wins versus Luck, who has not gotten to a Super Bowl up to this point, and they'll both be up for contract extension. The Luck camp, and a lot of people would say that Luck deserves the bigger contract, and then other people would say, well, 2 rings to 0, Wilson deserves the bigger contract. So we'll see how that plays out. One more interesting thing I want to note about this game is that if you look at the progression of games through the playoffs, In the first week of the playoffs, the Lions had a very heartbreaking loss to the Cowboys because of the picked up flag. The Cowboys then, in their next game, had a very heartbreaking loss when they lost to the Packers because of the Dez Bryant non-reception. And then in their next game, the Packers had a obviously very heartbreaking loss to the Seahawks when they blew a big lead. So it's kind of gone, the Lions lose to the Cowboys, they have a heartbreaking loss, they lose to the Packers, they have a heartbreaking loss, they lose to the Seahawks. Are the Seahawks now in for a very heartbreaking loss to the Patriots in the Super Bowl?
I like to believe that this was an NFC heartbreak only, and now that the NFC playoffs are done, and now it's a Super Bowl between AFC and NFC, that rule is thrown out the window.
Maybe. We will find out soon enough, I guess.
In just over a week, we'll know. Okay, well, I have nothing else to add to that game because, honestly, I'm still in shock that it is not a Green Bay New England rematch. Although you and I had talked before the games actually kicked off, there was only one possible rematch of all the possible Super Bowl outcomes, and it would have been Green Bay New England, and it nearly happened. Unfortunately, for Green Bay, it did not because they choked that game away. And sure enough, it is Seattle, New England, not a rematch of a game this year. And from what most people say, it's the game they wanted. They wanted the two number one seeds. They wanted the great defense, the power running game, and the former Patriots coach against the new Patriots coach. But let's see how the Patriots got there first. So, Mark, why don't you, as painful as it may be, take us through that beat down that the Patriots gave the Colts 45-7.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I'm going to send a press to this whole thing because it was, pretty much a bummer. Looking forward to the game, and especially after having watched such a great game, such a fantastic finish. Didn't really have a strong rooting interest either way in that game, but was very mesmerized by the way that it finished. And then into the Colts Patriots game with a lot of anticipation, and just wasn't good from the start. Patriots go up 7-0, and then Josh Cribbs tries to steal the punt off of his face mask. I guess it's some new special move he's been working on, but he clearly hasn't perfected it because it went straight off his face mask to a Patriot, and then the next thing you know, it's 14-0, and then the Colts did get an interception that it's a very key interception because it's led to the deflate gate, which we will get to later, but they actually went on a really long drive from there, a 93-yard drive down the field, largely aided by a few penalty calls. But it was 14-7 at that point. Then it seemed like maybe there was a chance, but Patriots drove back down the field, 17-7 at halftime, and from there it wasn't even a game. Can't even really tell you much of what happened in the fourth quarter because I didn't really watch any of this. I did other things, and the game was basically over, and it just wasn't fun to watch. If for some reason you were in a situation where you were seeing a friend or relative, get tortured or something, you would close your eyes because you wouldn't want to see it. So kind of a similar situation here. I just had no interest in seeing it anymore. But it certainly seemed like the Patriots were converting every single third down possible. I honestly thought it seemed like they had converted about 27 out of 23 third down possibilities, but I looked at the box score to see if that was actually the case. And late into the fourth quarter, they were actually 12 out of 16, even though it seemed much, much higher than that. I think the Colts were like 2 out of 8 or 2 out of 9. So that was one of the key differences in the game. And of course, the other one is the run game from both directions. LeGarrette Blount just ran all over the Colts, much like he did in last year's playoff game. The Colts need to get more physical up front. And Dominican Sue is a free agent, maybe someone that they'll pursue. Terrence Knighton of the Broncos, another, big boy free agent, maybe someone that they want to look into. But it's just been too long now that the Colts have had trouble stopping the run. I think we've been having the same conversation for, 6, 7, 8, 9 years? I don't know. Just they can't stop the run. Different coaching regimes, different base defenses, still can't stop the run. So they need to figure that out, obviously, and then they need a better run game themselves. Trent Richardson wasn't the answer. I think he'll be gone next season. And Herron is okay, I guess. He's serviceable, but they need to get somebody in there. They need to get a running game, and it'll help Luck out as well. So we'll see what happens in the off season. But this game itself was, not much of a game really.
Now, I do say you're taking this all from the Colts' perspective, so I'm going to flip it around, and I'm going to talk about the Patriots' perspective because, again, the Patriots did show this defense is legit. It is probably the best defense they've had since their Super Bowl run. It shut down an Andrew Luck-led offense, and I know he doesn't have as many weapons as Peyton Manning did out in Denver, probably not as many as some of the other high-scoring offenses, but this is a Andrew Luck-led offense, and that's the strength of the Colts team. They completely shut down T.Y. Hilton. They took Kobe Fleener out of the game. I think there's an APB out for him right now to see. I think he's a missing person. They took Dwayne Allen. I'm not sure he was in the game to be taken out of the game. Hakeem Nicks did not show up. Reggie Wayne is on his last leg. Singular. Dan Herron, for all the good he did in the last few weeks to get the Colts into the playoffs and get the run started, dropped a couple key passes, did not produce on the ground at all. But a lot of that is the Patriots defense is really good. And now that they have Darrelle Revis, who is better than Aqib Talib and who is healthier than Aqib Talib. You might remember Talib missed the playoffs or the key playoff games in the last 2 years, and they lost those games. So with Revis now healthy and playing, they can shut down offenses with Belichick's mind playing all the crazy defensive schemes he wants. On the offensive side, they continually, come out in crazy formations, tackle eligibles. Last week it was the running back ineligible. This week it was the tackle eligible. Sure enough, he scored. The Patriots do a great job week in, week out of designing plays that the other team won't understand or won't be able to identify quickly enough or won't be prepared for, and they can't stop them. So it'll be interesting to see how Seattle's defense handles that, because Seattle's defense is physical, likes to hit, loves to, get matched up, doesn't play a lot of man, though, so it's more zone and some soft coverage underneath and come up and hit, because those crossing routes, they flood the zones underneath. It will be interesting to see how that plays out. But unfortunately, also, the Patriots can run the ball, as the Colts know. And you're right, the Colts have not been able to stop the run since 1998 or so, maybe 96. I think it might have been 96 with Jim Harbaugh at quarterback. They made the AFC Championship game and almost had a Hail Mary to beat Pittsburgh. I don't think they've stopped the run much since then. So, yes, investing in run stoppers and maybe coming up with a better defensive scheme would help. But on offense, they've got to be able to run the ball themselves. As the Patriots showed, if you can run the ball and push it down someone's throat, pretty soon your play action's opened up and your passing game works better. So this Patriots team is pretty impressive. Tom Brady at the controls, kind of answering those critics who remember back in Week 4 against Kansas City, they get blown out, he gets benched, Jimmy Garoppolo comes in, actually looks better than Brady in that game. And some people say, maybe it's time to bench Brady. Maybe he's done. Well, it turns out, in Week 4, had you compared Manning and Brady's stats, you would have probably said, wow, Manning's on pace for another great year, and Brady looks done. Get to the end of the season, I think we've heard that script, but it's been completely flipped, right?
It has been, yeah. People definitely, overreacted. And I actually, was one of those. I had Brady in one of my fantasy leagues, and through 4 weeks, he'd done absolutely nothing. And in fact, had that horrible game against Kansas City, and I cut him. I'm like, okay, I need another quarterback. And picked up Tannehill. He had an okay season for me in that league, but yeah, Brady, of course, as soon as I cut him, he turned things around and had a good rest of the season. But I'm looking forward to the Super Bowl. It's an interesting matchup as far as you've got both number 1 seeds. So you've got, the best team from the AFC against the best team from the NFC. It looks like it's going to be fairly evenly matched. I guess we'll talk about the spread for this game. And it opened Seattle as a 2.5-point favorite, which is pretty close to the line that had been established earlier in the week. They said that Seattle would be a 3-point favorite over Green Bay when they had the lines for the 4 possible matchups. But I guess because of the way that the Patriots looked against the Colts, it opened as 2.5 for the Patriots, and then very quickly money started pouring in on the Patriots. Probably a recency bias, and probably from the fact that this line actually was posted early to mid fourth quarter while the game was still going on. So it was very, very fresh in their minds. Money came pouring in on the Patriots. Within 30, 40 minutes of the line opening, it was down. It was from Seattle 2.5 to basically a pick 'em. And now here we are on Tuesday night. The Patriots are a 1.5 point favorite. But from a public standpoint, I'm not sure that people are going to be too enthused. You usually have, maybe one team that you want to root for and one team that you don't. I think the general public perception is they don't really want either team to win. In general, unless you're a fan of the Seahawks, you kind of don't want to see teams back there all the time. And in this case, it's just 2 years in a row. But in general, people I think are against seeing the same team in there again. They want to see some fresh blood. And then the Patriots, of course, seems like they're there quite often. This is their 6th time in the last 14 years. They have, a bad reputation nationally as far as cheating for the whole Spygate thing, and now we've got the deflate gate issue to go for. So I don't know, from a public standpoint, I get the sense that maybe people will root for the Seahawks if they have to choose. But what do you think?
I definitely think people will be rooting for the Seahawks. While it isn't common for us to want to see the repeat, it has been a long time since a repeat champion has been crowned in the NFL. So that'll be one of the storylines from the Super Bowl as we get ready for XLIX, I believe. My Roman numerals aren't what they used to be. But this is the reigning Super Bowl champion going for a repeat against the last team that did. And then another storyline is Pete Carroll, fired by New England, replaced by Bill Belichick. And then there's, of course, Drew Bledsoe. Wait, no, there's nothing to do with Drew Bledsoe. Sorry. But there's also the great defense on the one side. Clearly been the best defense in the NFL the last 2 years against the creative mind of Belichick with his offense and the schemes that they run with Brady, one of the best quarterbacks of all time. So a lot of interesting storylines going into this. And, not the least of which, I believe Tom Brady has played Seattle in the past few years. I believe he ended up on the short end of the stick. And I believe Richard Sherman went up to him after the game and had a quick little chat with him. Do you remember that, Mark?
I do. It was in 2012. It was before most people knew who Richard Sherman even was. It was Russell Wilson's rookie season. I think the final score was like 24-23. It was close. Seattle won. And that is, of course, the game where Richard Sherman went after Brady afterwards on the field. Tom Brady probably barely even knew who he was. And he said, "You mad, bro?"
You mad, bro?
He tweeted it out. I think he made T-shirts of it. I think he made a billboard with "You mad, bro?" And it became like a national trending thing. And that's when we first became aware of who is this Richard Sherman guy. And he's basically backed it up since. At that point, like I said, people weren't really too aware of him, but he's backed it up since then. He's definitely one of the top 2 or 3 cornerbacks in the entire NFL. So that's another storyline you got right there as far as Revis versus Sherman. We'll see how healthy Sherman is. Sherman and Thomas are both banged up in the Seattle secondary. And then you have 2 physical running backs, Lynch and Blunt, beast mode versus blunt force. So we'll see them square off. And it's kind of funny because Blunt was a Steeler for most of the season. And in week 11, he had an issue where I think he was late for practice or late for a team meeting or something like that. And that one incident, Tomlin decided, you're not worth dealing with. I'm going to cut you, even though he had no legitimate backup behind Levy and Bell from that point. They were using Bree Archer and an undrafted free agent to back up Bell, and it came back to haunt them in the playoffs against the Ravens when Bell was not there. But it was just kind of funny how things work. He wasn't even a Patriot for most of the season. Now here he is, one of the key players in the Super Bowl. But I think a lot of people don't even realize how random the playoffs truly are. I mean, if you look at the Final Four teams, half of the Final Four was almost different. If the Des Bryant catch gets called in a different way, or if there's a different ref crew, the Cowboys could potentially win that game. The Patriots versus the Ravens, you play that game a few times. The Ravens, with their 14-point lead in the second half, could have had that game. And I think if you were to just play the playoffs 10 times, just play them and then go back to the start from scratch with the same players, no injuries, and the players have no recollection of this previous run that had just happened. I think if you played the playoffs 10 times, you'd probably get 5 or 6 different champions. In this case, we're going to get the Patriots or the Seahawks, but in some other iteration, it could have been the Ravens or the Steelers or probably not the Panthers or the Cardinals, but who knows? Maybe they would have won one of the 10 iterations.
No. But we'll discount the Cardinals and the Panthers for now. Thank you for trying to be nice to those fan bases. And I'm confused. You said LeGarrette Blount, his nickname is Blunt Force. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what people are calling him. And in fact, during the Patriots Colts game, he had a couple of runs where the announcers were even saying that, he kind of reminds me of Marshawn Lynch.
I thought his nickname was like smoking a fat blunt. That's not it?
That's probably, yes, that's his alternative nickname.
That is his street name because you may recall he was cited in the preseason for marijuana usage in the car with Le'Veon Bell, was it not?
Yes, yeah,
and
sure was.
I believe that may be really why they cut him. He's a bad influence. And I think it wasn't a late to practice or a meeting thing. Didn't he leave the field early from a game?
That's what it was.
Yeah, he left. And I don't think it was like he left at halftime, but I think he left with a minute left on the clock in the fourth quarter or something and just left.
Yep, that was it. Yep.
And because of that, because of his stupidity, he ends up a Patriot and is in the Super Bowl. How crazy is that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the opposite of karma or something like that. We'll have to come up with a term for that. Karma is you do something bad and something bad happens to you. And what is the word for, you do something bad and something really great happens to you?
Yeah, it's apparently blunt karma.
Yeah.
Blunt force karma, right there. Yeah, LeGarrette, congratulations. So, Super Bowl preview. We've got the Seahawks. We've got the Patriots. And, of course, we have 2 weeks to decide what we want to do about that. So I'm not going to ask you for your prediction now, Mark. I want you to sit on it, digest this. We'll find out more about the injuries, but it sounds like Sherman only had a sprained elbow. Sounds like he, in 2 weeks, they think he'll definitely be okay. Earl Thomas a little worse off. I think it was a dislocated shoulder, but they said, you can rehabilitate that in a couple weeks, shoot it up, and he should be okay to go. You just hope it doesn't pop out again during the game with a big jarring hit, and he is a hitter, so it'll be interesting. Hopefully no injuries play a part of that because really I think what we want to see, if you're not a fan of either team, you want to see them both at full health because this is the great defense of Seattle that's kind of galvanizing the league into, wow, we need to play defense again, versus Tom Brady, the pretty boy with the supermodel wife, and the crazy offensive schemes that they come up with. And that's really what we all want to see.
Yeah, I just want to see a good game. I hope it's close. I hope it comes down to the fourth quarter. And, like you mentioned, with most of the nation will be cheering for, as a Colts fan, I will have to be rooting for the Seahawks.
I will just make one prediction now, and we'll save our game predictions for next week. But I will predict the game will be closer than last year's Super Bowl when Seattle demolished Denver.
Yeah, way to go out on a limb there.
I'm feeling risky, a little more risky than Mike McCarthy. He could learn a thing or two from us, Mark.
He could for sure, but it's not hard to be much riskier than McCarthy.
Yeah, I just stepped on a crack. I don't think he does that. I think he steps over them.
Probably.
Good for you, Mike McCarthy, friend of the podcast. So, Mark, I think we're going to hold off on predictions for the Super Bowl till next week. We'll have a few Super Bowl lines that we can talk about then as well. But let's move on to one of our weekly segments, I should say. But this one is the On the Spot. And I believe it is your turn to put me, as we say, on the spot with the 3 questions. So I'm ready. Fire away, and I'll give you my quick takes on whatever it is you're going to ask me.
All right. Well, one of them is very much related to a topic we've been discussing a lot tonight, including one that we just touched on a little bit regarding McCarthy. So McCarthy, we touched on all the errors that he had in Sunday's game, but he'd also had that reputation for a while as far as being very bad at game management, very bad with in-game decisions, bad with clock management. If you read the column from last year, the year before, that Bill Barnwell used to do, thank you for not coaching, Mike McCarthy was one of the key contributors. I think he kept that column alive because every single week he had some bad decision. If you were the GM of the Packers, with McCarthy's blunders in Sunday's game, as well as all his previous ones, be enough reason to fire him?
No. He got you the number 2 seed. He got you to the championship game in the NFC. He really, his blunders didn't completely cost you the game. Because again, if a backup third-string tight end does not let the ball go through his hands at the 2:08 mark and bounce off his face mask, if he either blocks instead of going for the catch, or if he just catches that, we're not even having these conversations. We're talking about Patriots versus Packers. So to say that a guy fumbling an onside kick and then you lose the coin toss, and I mean, you got Aaron Rodgers to drive you down the field. I mean, you took the shackles off and you tied the game, and then you lost the coin toss, and the momentum was against you. So no, I don't think you get rid of him, but I think you maybe ask him if what you need is to hire a special assistant on offense who's your game manager, your clock manager guy, because you don't make good decisions. And when it gets late, he buzzes in your ear and he's like, call timeout. Wait until 4 seconds to call timeout. Things like that. Maybe they force him to get somebody, because he's got too much on his mind apparently to understand things like when to call a timeout, when not to call a timeout, when to go for it on 4th down, when not to go for it on 4th down. So maybe they need to hire somebody to make those decisions for him.
Okay. Yeah, I would say at the very least, at a minimum, the GM needs to sit him down, have a very serious conversation with him and say, look, there are some things you need to work on. You need to get this corrected. I don't care who you talk to, if it's some other coach, someone that you know, someone that you trust. You need to, get better at this, and you're on notice. And this next year, if we still see the same mistakes, if you're still making the same blunders, the same strategy decision, errors, clock management errors, you're gone. Because, we have an all-timer QB right here, and we need to take advantage of it while he's in his prime. And we're not going to win a Super Bowl if you continue to coach this way. I know he already has one. I know he's already been there and won. But, maybe he could have more. You could argue that they should have won Sunday's game and be in the Super Bowl and maybe have another one. So I would at least put him on notice and say, hey, these things improve, or we'll find someone who can do it better.
I think he did ask for help, but unfortunately he asked Andy Reid for help. And as everyone knows, Andy Reid's clock management is considered second to none on the bad end of the spectrum. So maybe Mike McCarthy asked him, and Andy went to all those NFC Championship games. He must be a guy I should ask, and he must know what's going on. That may have been the downfall right there.
Maybe. It boggles my mind how someone could coach at the highest level of football for so many years. I think McCarthy's been a coach for 8 or 9 years, Reid even longer, and yet still have these same recurring issues. And clock management is not that tough. I mean, you could sit down with someone for 10 minutes and say, okay, use your timeouts before the 2-minute warning. You don't take a timeout on fourth down with 19 seconds left at the end of the game. You wait till there's 4 seconds left to kick your field goal. Just some basic things. Put it in a notebook. Study it before every game. I mean, it cannot be that hard. Anyway, on to question number 2. There is a report tonight saying that the Patriots footballs were deflated. It says that each team gets 12 balls to prepare for the game. The NFL has found that 11 of the 12 Patriots game balls were inflated 2 pounds per square inch less than what they're supposed to. Now, the game was wet and rainy, and the deflated ball makes it easier to throw and catch, which is certainly an advantage in rainy, wet conditions. If it is officially determined that the Patriots willfully, knowingly deflated these balls on purpose to gain an advantage, what punishment should the NFL give them?
Well, first let me say, inflated, deflated, overinflated, underinflated, that game wasn't going to end much differently than it did. So I want to get that out before I answer your question, because many people would hear this and say, oh, it's sour grapes from a Colts fan, or it's just poor sportsmanship, it's a sore loser. No, the Patriots won the game. The Patriots were always going to win the game. You could have probably played with a wet balloon and they were going to win the game. So, no chance. The way the Colts played, they were not winning that game, whether they were using the greatest ball in the world or not. Now, to answer your question, this would be the second instance under Roger Goodell's stewardship that Bill Belichick would have been caught breaking rules. Not just little rules like, he didn't wear the right socks, or he wore a Kangol or his Beats headphones to the press conference and get slapped a little fine because, hey, you're hurting our sponsors. These are integrity of the game rules. He already had and it was proven that we had Spygate, that he was recording. We don't know whether or not it helped, but he broke a rule. And at that time, I believe they were fined $500,000 and they lost a draft pick, right?
I believe so, yes.
So I'm assuming that if this is found to be true, this is, again, an integrity of the game thing. You can't let this go and just slap him on the wrist, because, honestly, the betting public is half of what drives the popularity of your league. The moment we start thinking that certain teams are breaking rules, it's going to just leave a bad taste in people's mouths, and it's going to make a cloud of suspicion on certain things, and you do not want that. If you're the NFL, you have to step in and say, we cannot even risk any sign of impropriety here. So I think you're going to see another $500,000 fine to the Patriots and another loss of a first-round pick, and I think Bill Belichick is going to be suspended for the first game of next year, because that's the punishment that he most dearly holds. Is he doesn't want to miss football. The money, that's Robert Kraft's, he doesn't care. The draft picks, well, he blows his first-round pick on half the time anyway on bad players. So, but if you took him out of coaching, don't let him have any contact with the team, similar to the Sean Payton situation, but it's not a whole year thing. But it's going to be a game or two. Show him that you mean business. Maybe then he'll stop breaking the rules. Because it boggles my mind that he needs to think we need to break the rules. You played the Colts 3 times with Andrew Luck, and you demolished them every time. So whether it's wet and rainy, whether it's a hurricane, it didn't matter. You had the upper hand. You should not be breaking rules. What we should have found out is that the Colts were doing something like this because they were trying to find a new edge to beat the Patriots. But the Patriots doing it is just, it's mind-boggling, because when you're the better team, the home team, the team that's going to most likely win and go to the Super Bowl, and you're the one breaking the rules, that's just idiotic.
Yeah, I will say, I guess 3 things. One is that I would go even harsher, especially since it's a second-time offense. But we know they've already broken the rules and tried to gain an advantage. I think $500,000 is the maximum fine that they're allowed to give, so can't go any higher there. But give the $500,000 fine. I would suspend Belichick for a handful of games, maybe even up to 6 to 8 games. Make him realize, it's happened again. So if they do find out that willfully did this, they have to send a message like, do not do this. And if something happens again in the future, you might get suspended for a full season or more. And I would take multiple draft picks, make the team feel the pain for doing this. I agree with you. I'm going to say the same thing, that outcome of this game now changed. They still ran for 800 yards on the ground, and it wouldn't matter. They could have played with a fully deflated ball, normal ball, and they just literally won the game without throwing a single pass. They could have just handed the blunt, every single play. It would not have mattered. But the integrity of the game, you do have to have a very harsh penalty. One thing that worries me is that Kraft is one of the owners that was instrumental in getting Goodell named the commissioner, and so Goodell and Kraft are kind of buddy-buddy. He did have the penalties, or the tapes for Spygate he had destroyed, which no one is really sure why. So no one will ever be able to see those, but what was on those tapes and why did he destroy them? So it makes me wonder if he's going to be able to be harsh enough and be impartial enough for this investigation and any penalty that needs to be given out. And thirdly, the NFL just needs to change their policy. The article tonight that I read said that, the refs, each team gets 12 balls to prepare for the game. The refs look at the balls, review them, inspect them 2 hours before kickoff, and then give them back to the team. Well, guess what? That gives the team 2 hours to still do whatever they want to the balls before kickoff. So I think they need to come up with a new policy or have some third party that handles the ball for both teams. But something's broken here.
Yeah, how about you hire an NFL person, not a team person, because each team has their own ball boy or ball person or ball adjuster, whatever it is. Why doesn't the NFL have those people? As soon as the refs have, checked in the 12 balls that the teams worked on that week and make sure they all pass code, you give them to the NFL's official ball handler. And that person then is on the sideline of, you actually have 2 of them, one on each sideline. And they're the ones throwing the balls in on offense. Because there'd be less chance that an NFL employee is inflating or deflating on behalf of a team, right? But
yeah.
The one thing I will say, your Goodell comment, it does worry me as well. But with all the improprieties that have gone on this past year and how much scrutiny he's coming under, I have to think he's going to take a stand. And he did punish Kraft before. He hit him with the $500,000 fine. He took away a draft pick. And as you said, he destroyed tapes for no apparent reason. But again, I think he's going to give him the same $500,000 max fine. And Robert Kraft accepted it before. Believe me, he won't notice that as much as you or I might notice like a $100 fine. Also, taking the draft pick. He did it before, so I think he could go that route. And he did threaten Belichick with suspension before. He didn't do it, but he threatened him. And now after the Sean Payton incident, I think he has to follow through with some sort of suspension, right? If, and again, this is all if it is proved that the Patriots willfully and knowingly did something, which seems likely if 11 of the 12 footballs are deflated.
Exactly. So we'll see how that plays out. Like I said, we're recording this Tuesday night. That report just came out. The NFL has already said that they think they might need a couple more days to get this all sorted out. So, I think they want this wrapped up by Thursday or Friday. So we'll see what happens with this, but it'll be interesting to see, if they do find that they altered the balls, to see what kind of punishment that Goodell meets out. For the third question, we talked about this a few weeks ago when they were coaching on Black Monday. And at the time, we thought there were only 5 coaching vacancies. And then a day or two later, Doug Beroni took $4 million in weigh-in. And, we thought later that, he must know something, that he's going to get a job somewhere. He did get a job somewhere today. He's the, I think, assistant head coach and offensive line coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But he does get to keep his $4 million, and he may or may not ever become an NFL coach again. We'll see. And then on a later podcast, I asked you to rank the 6 openings as far as if you were a head coach candidate, rank the opening situations. Now we actually have 7 new coaches because the Broncos decided to let go of John Fox, or whether they, quote unquote, mutually agreed to part ways. So now I'm going to ask you, for these 7 new coaches, and for the purpose of this, I'm going to go ahead and say, assume that the Falcons hire Dan Quinn. All indications are that that's what they're going to do. They're going to wait until after the Super Bowl and hire him. And maybe that's a good choice. Maybe they're being smart by waiting it out and getting one of the top candidates. So for this exercise, assume they have Quinn. Of the 7 new coaches, and I'll run through them real quick for you here, rank them as far as who you think got rank the hirings as far as the best hiring to the worst. So we had Rex Ryan to the Bills, Bowles to the Jets, Kubiak to the Broncos, Del Rio to the Raiders, Fox to the Bears, Quinn to the Falcons, and Tom Sula to the Niners.
Wow. What's crazy is that you and I, did list this, and we said Atlanta was the best job out there. And we even mentioned that Rex Ryan would be a great fit for that because, hey, you improve that defense, you got an offense, it's going to be great for you. But then he went to Buffalo, where they already have a really good defense and no quarterback. Sounds a lot like someplace else that he was, and I can't remember where. Oh, yeah, it was the Jets, where he never had a quarterback and he had a good defense and he couldn't get over the hump. So good for him. But, yeah, I think the strange thing to me is I don't know a lot about Quinn, but I'm going to say that's the best hire because they did wait it out. They didn't jump in and grab a retread like John Fox, who his ultra-conservative play calling and his ultra-conservative mode, he can get you some wins, I agree, but he's not going to get you over the top. I mean, he had one of the all-time great QBs, and in the first year with him, some of his calls, especially in that playoff game with the Ravens, kneeling and taking a knee instead of trying to throw it downfield and get field goals and such before halves and before end of games, he's just too conservative, and you're putting him in a situation with Jay Cutler, so that goes somewhere else. But I'm going to put Quinn at number 1 because I love the situation he's getting into, but also I think he is the hot commodity. He's not the retread. He's the guy that clearly has crafted a defense out there, and that's what they need in Atlanta. So if that's the hire, I'm going to accept that. Surprisingly, I'm going to give Del Rio number 2. The Raiders got a head coach who has coached in the NFL with experience, actually did okay, has then gone on, molded a defense in Denver that wasn't very good into a pretty good defense, and now he gets a chance to do it in Oakland. The only drawback for him is if the owners meddle like Al Davis used to, then he has no hope. But if they allow him to do what he needs to do, I think that's actually a good hire. Third, I'm going to throw Bowles. I just think that he's a good personality, good aggressive scheme, and for what the Jets have, they have a defense. I know a lot of people said, well, why didn't they go grab an offensive mind? I don't know what offensive mind you would have grabbed that could have improved Geno Smith. So I give Bowles the chance, and let's see what happens. Then I'd probably have to go back out to Denver. Kubiak is going to work really well with John Elway. And also, there's talk that he's one of the most pliable coaches. He's very able to adapt his system to his personnel, and in this case, to his quarterback if Peyton Manning returns. So he's not one of those that would have come in and said, no, we're going West Coast regardless, and then Peyton's like, screw that, I'm retiring. Gary Kubiak has even said, if I have to learn his playbook, I'll learn his playbook. So that's a good hire in that sense, but also I think he's going to work really well with John Elway, and over the long term, they're going to craft an offense that suits what Elway used to do and what Kubiak learned from being, their days of the Broncos. So I think that'll be a good fit as long as he keeps good coordinators around him. Again, he is an experienced head coach, got to the playoffs a couple of times, so okay. After that, I don't know, Fox and Ryan to me are about the same. Ryan went to a great defense. Unfortunately, that's the only thing he knows. It's not going to end well. Fox going to the Bears, he's not going to be able to get through to Jay Cutler. That's not the right choice there. And yeah, maybe he can improve their defense, maybe not. but he's too conservative. And in a division with Aaron Rodgers and Matt Stafford, I just don't see him getting it done. And you'll notice I saved last for you, Mark, the San Francisco 49ers hiring of Tom Sula. I believe it's pronounced. I'm not even 100% sure. The real reason I hate that hire, let me start with the first reason I hate the hire, is it means you got rid of Jim Harbaugh. The second reason is you interviewed pretty much everybody on your staff and then promoted the offensive or defensive line coach. And because of that, Vic Fangio left, so you lost your defensive coordinator. Roman left the offensive coordinator to go with Rex Ryan, didn't he? I believe they've even lost a secondary coach. So pretty much you had a great coaching staff there, and that's really why you were a pretty good team. They turned that around. You gutted the whole thing and moved a guy up who's a position coach. That's not terribly impressive to me. And as you and I talked on a previous podcast, regardless of who they got in there, it was likely going to be a drop-off from Jim Harbaugh. But in this case, I think it's a big drop-off, and you're always going to be compared to Jim Harbaugh. So bad luck for you.
All right. Yeah, I like that answer. I agree with both extremes of that. I like the Falcons at number one, and I'm not even necessarily saying that Quinn will be the best coach of those seven, but I like the fact that you said that they were willing to wait. There is, teams feel like they need to rush and get a, staff in place. Well, they're kind of already getting around that. I think, they already have their offensive coordinator, and it's pretty much, people are putting the pieces together that Quinn, this is who he would want as his offensive coordinator. So he's pretty much already said, okay, if you hire me, this is who I want. So they're able to still kind of get around the staff building thing. But, he has built the defense for the team that has had the number one defense in the NFL for each of the last 2 years. And the last time that a team had the number one defense as far as points allowed and yards allowed in back-to-back seasons was the 85-86 Bears. And I think that was a pretty good defense. I think that's one of the Colts standards. Anytime someone talks about how good a defense is, one of the first references that ever comes up is the 85 Bears. So if we're making that comparison, pretty good defensive coach. We'll see what he's able to do in Atlanta. So I like the fact that they were willing to wait for him. I definitely agree that Tom Sula is the worst. I think they could have done much better. And, being here in the Bay Area, he's already getting made fun of. He's already had a couple of media appearances that were just abominations. So he's going to have to get better with dealing with the media for sure. As for your 2 through 6, I think I'd have a little bit different order. I might have Rex Ryan a little bit higher. He was in a pretty bad situation with the Jets and just never had a good quarterback or receivers. Maybe we'll get some better talent in Buffalo. But I agree with the first and seventh of those, and then we'll see how those others shake out in the middle.
Yeah, and honestly, the middle is, pretty close. Although I did drop Fox and Ryan to tier 3. But it is interesting that you say that the Niners, you've already had some media gaffes and some uninspired performances. I did hear Trent Baalke, the GM, mention, well, now we won't have a house divided anymore. So basically, he's saying he hired a yes man to be his head coach. Is that really what you want? You want a yes man who's friendly to be your head coach? Because you got rid of all your other coaches, and they were all pretty good, I'm guessing, because the team had been pretty good. And because of that, you're going to suffer tremendously, I have a feeling. So I hope he's happy that he has somebody now that's friendly. When he's sitting at 6-10 next year, he can be like, but it was a nice, friendly 6-10.
Yeah, he'll have a coach that won't push back on him as much, but will not get the same number of wins either. So we'll see how happy he is with that trade-off. Now, we usually have 3 questions for us sponsors, but they have a bonus question. So we have the Pro Bowl coming up this weekend. On Wednesday night, we have the draft between Team Carter and Team Irvin. So I'm sure you've examined all the players that are available now that Andy Dalton, the 19th alternate, has been named to the Pro Bowl, since everyone who, has any kind of even minor injury backs out of the game. Anyone that's going to be a free agent backs out of the game because they don't want to take the chance of an injury before they get their big contract. So, if you can break down the draft, kind of tell me how it's going to go for the first 10 rounds or so. I'm completely kidding because I don't want any part to do with that. But I know that you yourself don't really watch the Pro Bowl. So the bonus question is, what would you do? Would you cancel it? Would you create some kind of skills competition? Would you change up the format? What would you do if you were in charge?
I believe first I would draft Andrew Luck with my number one. Oh, that's not what you asked. Never mind. But in all honesty, I didn't know the Pro Bowl was this week. I'm glad you told me so that I won't be embarrassed when we break it down next week. I'll get the game films ready for us. Now, I think what they should do, first, they're not going to get rid of it in some way, shape, or form. It actually gets a rating that you wouldn't believe for such a worthless competition. I don't know the exact number, but I want to say it's like an 8 or a 9 rating. Do you know how baseball does in the World Series? It does like a 10. This is the Pro Bowl. This is you and me and 6 other guys who don't want to be here throwing the ball around or half tackling, and it gets as good of ratings as playoff baseball. So they're not going to get rid of it. It obviously will generate revenue. I think what I'd like to see is I would add a skills competition, and maybe I'd make it more like what the NHL does with their All-Star game. They do a multi-day event, and they have a skills competition the day before. They also have a rookies or old-timers game. I don't know which is which anymore. But they do that the day before, and then they have the All-Star game the following day. Why not do something like that? Do a skills competition. Let's see who the fastest man in the NFL is of the all pros. Who the best thrower. You throw the football through the tire. Just fun things like that. It's good video too. So it's something easy the NFL could do. I don't recommend beach 2-on-2 football or whatever that was. And I'm certain Robert Edwards would agree with me.
Yeah, the torn knee or whatever. But the speed competition, the race off. I don't know how old Dale Green is these days, but I'd love to see him compete. I think he'd still have a chance.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say there's an old timers competition, but maybe he'd be in the just main competition.
I think so.
Yes. So I think add something like that to the Saturday, then tie it into the awards banquet, although they do that the following Saturday. Maybe you figure out something. Tie it all together, but they're not going to get rid of it, and I'm okay with it. I don't care. I'm not going to watch it, but I don't care.
Okay.
Maybe go back to AFC, NFC, just so, we have these. I don't know that this whole fantasy football angle is really working because, honestly, I don't even know who's in the draft to pick. I know sometimes who gets Pro Bowl nomination or award when ESPN does their special on it or something, but by the time the game rolls around, like you said, there's no way half those players are even playing. In fact, I'm not going to be able to discuss this anymore because I think I just pulled a vocal cord. So I'm going to have to drop out of Pro Bowl discussion from here on out.
Yeah, I'm still not used to the whole format where they have captains picking teams. I'm used to the AFC, NFC. In fact, when I saw, I guess, today that Aaron Rodgers pulled out and was replaced by Andy Dalton, it caught me off guard because I thought, wait a second, Rodgers in the NFC, how did he get replaced by an AFC quarterback? And then I remembered, they had this stupid new format, so, yeah.
So, my take, give it the back to the AFC, NFC. At least then you have, some semblance of a rivalry, and also add the skills competition.
But we'll see what happens with the Pro Bowl going forward. But even though it's still getting ratings, I think it is starting to lose a little bit of traction across the country.
Oh, it lost traction years ago, but it's still here because it still gets ratings.
Yeah.
So that was nice. That was one of our weekly segments. And now we're going to move on to another weekly segment, Mark. And this is where you get to be the star. It's the oft-imitated, never duplicated Hef's Hates. So what do you hate this week, Mark?
This week, I hate, with a passion, people on Twitter. And not all of them, but the people that express their hatred on Twitter. And I'm specifically referring in this case to after the Seahawks-Packers game, if you go on Twitter and read the mentions and timeline for Brandon Bostic, the backup tight end on the Packers, who leaped up for the onside kick, and it bounced out of his hands, and the Seahawks recovered, and Packers went on to lose. Like you mentioned earlier, his job on that play was to block and for Jordy Nelson to catch, but he's a professional athlete, so I can understand how his instincts when he sees the ball coming right towards him is to jump up and grab it, even though that technically wasn't what he was supposed to do. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, he catches that ball, goes to the ground, Packers win the game. But in this 1 time out of 10, he made a play for it, didn't get it, they lose. But that is no reason for people to go on Twitter and tweet at him, telling him that they want him to die, he should go kill himself, he, ruined the team, he ruined their chances, and just all this just utter hatred. I mean, yes, you want your team to win, but at the end of the day, it's a game. And to go on Twitter and to tell someone to die and to tell them that, you want them to kill themselves, there's literally no excuse, no call for that. And I think, I think we should eventually get to the point where we start prosecuting that kind of thing, because there's just no place for it. If that's your attitude, if you have, get off Twitter. There's zero need for that. Completely uncalled for. So, I know a lot of the Hef segments are, sometimes trivial things or little things, but, this is something that, I'm dead serious. There's just no call for that. Completely unacceptable. And if you ever find yourself where you want to send that tweet, stop. Put down your phone, walk away, remind yourself that it's a game. He's more affected by it than you are. And just don't send that message.
Very well put, Mr. Heflin. And it's probably a good thing that Twitter wasn't around when Mike Vanderjagt missed a potential game-tying field goal for the Colts. So Colt fans couldn't be the ones doing that exact same idiotic thing. Although Peyton Manning made up for it later by talking about his drunk Canadian kicker.
He did it in a good, funny way, though. So.
Yes. After Vanderjagt left the team and sniped at him first, so it was almost like a Twitter war before there was Twitter.
Yes.
Oh, the good old days when quarterbacks and kickers would talk through the media at each other. All right, so that was a good hate. I appreciate that you're back to the hate. Because for those that listened last week, Mark actually went with almost Hef's like, and it just didn't have the same ring to it to me. So I look forward to Hef's hate every week, and next week I want another good hate. But that'll move us on to our final weekly segment, which is Miller's Minute. It's my chance to go pop culture on you, and this week I wanted to talk about a new album that came out, Mark. I know you're a big fan, and I know one of the songs on here has gotten so much play that everyone in America probably already knows it if they're football fans. And that song would be Centuries by Fall Out Boy. If you followed college football at all on ESPN and ABC, you probably heard the song, I'd say, 174 times a week, give or take in promos. Is that about right?
That's about right. It's pretty prevalent.
Yes. Well, Centuries is actually off of their new album, which came out this week, American Beauty, American Psycho. And it is their first album in, I believe, 4 years. It's the 6th album overall, for the 6th studio album, I should say. You know how nowadays they're bootlegs and live albums and everything else. 6th studio album for them. And I will say, it's pretty darn good. I don't know if it's the top album they've made, but there are a couple of really good tracks out there that I think you should take a look at. Go out and download from iTunes or whatever music source you use, just not Napster, because I think that's still illegal. But The Kids Aren't All Right is a really good tune. Uma Thurman is an interesting song, and yes, it is Uma Thurman, the actress. You may remember her from such roles as Pulp Fiction. I can't think of another role, but Pulp Fiction would be the one. I'm certain she's been in others. And then Immortals, which is the 10th track on the album. Really good songs. I highly recommend at least checking out a few of those. I don't say go out and grab the whole album, especially in this day and age when you can digitally download 1 or 2 songs. But obviously, Centuries, most people probably already have or know. But The Kids Aren't All Right, Uma Thurman, and Immortals. Check them out on your local music store and see what you think.
I will check that out. And my comments on that are, one, Uma Thurman, I think, also played Poison Ivy in one of the Batman movies. And then kids on...
See, I was thinking Poison Ivy, the movie, and that was that Drew Barrymore?
Yes, I think so. And I don't know why I know that and how I know that, because I've never seen that movie, but yes, I do.
Oh, you never saw that movie? You had a poster of Drew Barrymore up at your house from that movie, as I recall.
I may have had the E.T. poster when I was like 6, but probably
sorry.
more so the Alien.
Sorry, wrong movie.
And then The Kids Aren't All Right. I thought that was an Offspring song. Am I thinking of something different?
I think you're thinking of something different. You do know that there are a number of songs that end up with similar or competing names over time. Yeah, it's not a remake, if that's what you're wondering.
Okay. I think Offspring has a similar...
I think it was a similar
title. Yes.
But yes, it's that is the problem with music now being in its 6th, 7th decade. Sometimes the same song titles get used.
Yeah. And then the third comment is for the song Centuries. I have heard it many, many times during football games. I gotta say, I'm not tired of it yet. It's so catchy. Every time it comes on, I find myself singing it out loud.
Sadly, there are a few songs like that and having done some long driving trips to Vegas, Colorado for the holidays, I sat through, on Sirius XM, you'll hear a lot of the songs replayed over and over, but some of them, Centuries was one, One Republic has a couple songs, I think The Fray, Love Don't Die, I didn't turn them off. So Love Runs Out by One Republic, Love Don't Die by The Fray, and Centuries. Kind of tap my foot along every time. It's odd.
Did you happen to hear Boom Clap? Because I remembered you mentioning this as part of your Miller's Minute, I don't know, like a month ago, as far as one of the number one songs of 2014. And at the time, I didn't know of it or didn't think that I had heard it. But I've heard it on the radio now, and I gotta say, it's not horrible. It's not great by any means, but it's kind of catchy.
There are like 7 words in the entire song.
Like I said, I did say it was a great song, but it is catchy.
Sadly, yes, I'm certain I heard that. And I probably heard Blank Space by Taylor Swift 100 times, which is great.
Yeah, she's all over the radio right now.
Yes, terrestrial and Sirius XM. All right, well, that wraps Miller's Minute. But before we sign off tonight, Mark, I just wanted to let all the listeners out there know 2 things. We will be doing a podcast next week, even though there are no games. And you might be asking, well, what will you talk about if there are no games to break down? So, Mark, what will we talk about if there are no games to break down?
Well, first of all, we're going to do a very detailed study of the Pro Bowl. We're going to, look into the plays and kind of see the strategy and the scoring plays and what happened. And actually, we'll probably do none of that. But.
Draft analysis of the Pro Bowl?
No. I'm hoping, maybe we won't even mention it at all, or maybe we'll only mention the final score, or maybe we'll only mention if there was some kind of, controversy or fight or, something that we read about on ESPN.com, since we probably won't be watching the game.
Catastrophic injury, any of that. Hopefully none, but if something like that happens, yes, we would have to mention it.
Yes,
but
we would acknowledge it.
But instead of the Pro Bowl, what can we talk about?
We will be discussing 2 things. We will be talking about the NFL awards, which there's an award show the night before the Super Bowl. So we'll be talking about our picks for MVP, Coach of the Year, Rookie of the Year, etc. And then we will also be discussing Super Bowl props. So I think the full list comes out on Thursday. So we will have time to review it this weekend, do our analysis, find a few that each of us like. So we'll each come in with our 3 favorites and why we think it'll happen. I know this last weekend there was one that I loved and it hit easily, and it was Reggie Wayne receptions. He just is not active lately. He's not even on the field that much. The over-under, I was surprised, was 2.5 receptions. went kind of big on the under and felt pretty safe. I was like, there's no way he's getting 3 receptions. He didn't even have 3 targets. He had 2 targets and 0 receptions. So that was an easy winner, and it's that kind of prop and that kind of analysis that we're going to bring next week.
Would that be similar to the analysis of who's going to score the first touchdown in a game? And say you decide, well, the odds of this guy, that guy, oh, this one looks promising. I'll just throw a little money down on
First overall touchdown in the game, that one paid 70 to 1. So 70 plus 330, that's $1,030 that I came super duper close to winning, because in fact he did score the first touchdown of the game until it was reviewed and they looked and saw that his knee was down about a few inches before the ball crossed the plane, and then on the next play they gave it to Lacey, and then on the next play they kicked the field goal, and then I think it was Will Cobb who actually ended up scoring the first touchdown of the game.
It was.
And so I felt cheated out of $1,000, but we'll see if I can recapture a Super Bowl prop.
Well, upon further review, we're taking that money right out of Mark's pocket.
Yeah, it was great. I loved it.
All right, well, it sounds like it'll be an exciting podcast then if we have awards predictions, Super Bowl props, the on-the-spot, Hef's Hates, there's Minute. I think we can fill up a good amount of time and bring some very good knowledge to the people.
I think so. And, I mentioned a week or two ago, maybe earlier, that I had a strategy for purchasing winning Super Bowl squares. Should I disclose that now, or do we tease people for one more week and then include it in next week's podcast?
Oh, I definitely think that is part of our Super Bowl props, because not only would you bet the Super Bowl props like receiving yards versus rushing yards of a certain player, but that's when you start thinking about your Super Bowl square strategy, right?
Okay, we will save it for next week then. So
excellent.
Stay tuned. It's a winning strategy, so you're gonna want to hear it.
All right, and if you can't wait for the winning strategy, well, you'll have to. But if you want more information about Steel Scorpion Sports, you can find that anytime. Go out to steelscorpionsports.com. Browse around the website. You can find the podcast on the blogs page. You can read about the rules, see some of the leagues, see why we think we're a better species of fantasy football with the multiplier, the mulligans, and the all-play format. So check it out, steelscorpionsports.com, a better species of fantasy football. And with that, Mark, we're going to call this Championship Week podcast wrapped. So signing off from San Diego, I'm Jeff Miller.
Signing off from San Jose, I'm Mark Heflin.
Take care, sports fans.